We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And the Cowboys have done it. They win again, this one in dramatic fashion. 29-23 overtime win at home. I've just come from the stadium, and you'll hear from interviews with Jerry, Randy Gregory, but Ed Werder alongside from the Frito Nation Productions. And Ed, who would have ever thought? 3-5. We thought we were on the Jason Garrett death march. Thought his career was coming to an end, and now the Cowboys sit here 8-5 in the driver's seat. I mean, it would be true disaster to lose this division at this point. 2 games clear of in the division, and the Redskins are in horrible trouble. Basically, they said goodbye to the Eagles. Pretty remarkable day for the Cowboys.
Well, they swept the Eagles, who are the defending Super Bowl champions, which is worth noting, I think. They set themselves up for a hat and T-shirt game next week against the Indianapolis Colts, who, by the way, are led by the Cowboys' former defensive coordinator, so to speak, in Matt Eberflus, who calls all the defenses now in that capacity with the Colts. And, yeah, the Cowboys have a 2-game lead. Plus the tiebreaker over the Eagles with 3 games left to play. So they're virtually assured of winning the division and advancing to the playoffs for just the 3rd time under Jason Garrett, who coached like a championship-minded coach today.
Oh, my gosh. And we will talk about it, the gutsy call in overtime. It was the right call. But I want to know what you were thinking at that very moment when they lined up to do it. Were you on board with it? We'll talk about it all. We can talk about the defense. Dak's performance, his up and down performance, what the defense did. And then Brett Maher, just when you're ready to cut the guy, he comes through with an enormous Cowboys record.
A lot of franchise records set today.
Franchise record for kicking.
Not just in kicking.
Yes.
Also in quarterbacking.
Some quarterbacking.
And yet I think you can argue that the quarterback might be the guy who holds this team back in the playoffs.
Whoa. We'll get to that. So many opinions and so many interviews that we have for you. It is the Doomsday Podcast.
You almost forget what the name of our podcast
I worked for several people. Play the music. And yes, the Cowboys do move to 8-5, and so good to be with you. Ed Werder, is this team has just gotten on a roll and able to, on a day when 3 turnovers and, -2 in that category, and yet the numbers, the offensive numbers, they just dominated time of possession, first downs, and somehow, Ed, they're able to hold on to this thing. It was a really strange game in a lot of ways, but there is Jason Garrett. The man who's really, you talk about the hot seat. I think at one point I might have had it like 85% chance. I don't know what the highest I ever had it was.
I think it was about 85%.
That he was the firing meter for Jason, and now he's back at maybe like 95. I might up it to like 98% chance that he's going to be back, and he has turned this thing around. And there was Garrett in one of those moments. Now, God love him. They had to call a timeout and kind of think it over. But still,
He was a man of conviction. It was proven.
I know. He had time to think about it. I thought,
is he
going to lose his nerve? 4th and 1. Cowboys could have done the most conservative thing would be kick the short field goal and take the lead in overtime and then kick off.
So my question is, did he not trust his kicker? Did he not trust his defense?
There was good reason for both of those, mainly the kicker, though. But I think in that moment it was like, let's turn the lights out. And I think the truth is, I think he does have some belief in his defense and thought if they had to make a stop down there, they're backed up a little bit, and maybe they could. But, hey, to call 4th and 1, and then that was not an easy play there.
Well, they got stopped on 3rd and 1,
correct,
with Zeke running to the right. So then they run Zeke to the left on 4th and 1, and he narrowly made it, quite honestly. And to put it in the right context, I think Garrett wasn't just coaching to win the game; he was effectively coaching to win the division right there. Mm-hmm. And he didn't show that same conviction or nerve in previous games. You know, he went conservative in the overtime loss to the Texans, and he punted when he shouldn't have. Same thing in the Redskins game. He didn't go for it late in the game once he was in field goal range. He just settled for a field goal that they ultimately missed and lost the game. And so this was a chance that he seized, which was to win the game in overtime without ever giving the Eagles a chance to have the ball. Now I'm going to say one more thing about this, and that is that I think the new rule, overtime rule, shortening overtime, is totally unfair to the team that loses the coin toss because of exactly what happened in this game. One of the factors that Garrett had to consider in deciding to go for it and not kick the field goal was he only had to defend the field for 2 minutes if he didn't get it. It's ridiculous that in one possession, the first team can basically run out all of the time that there is on the clock, and this is not the first game we've seen that in. So I think the new rule is wholly unfair to the team that does not get the ball first because, A, they lose if they give up a touchdown, and now, B, they can lose if they only give up a field goal and never see the ball because the opponent, possesses the ball for 10 minutes, as a lot of teams are capable of doing, including the one the Eagles ran up against today.
Yeah, and that's what they did. They had a huge time of possession.
Yeah, let's go over. Can we go over those real quick?
Yeah, hit them.
Okay. I mean, this
some of the
should
stats.
not have been, based on the stats, a 5-quarter game.
This is an ode to Cooperstein. He loves to read a good box score.
Dallas had the ball for 45 minutes and 32 seconds. Philadelphia, 22 minutes and 32 seconds. Dallas had 93 offensive plays, 48 for Philadelphia. Dallas had 32 first downs, half as many, 16 for Philadelphia. Yards, Dallas 576. Philadelphia 256, almost 2-1 at least in every one of those categories, and the Cowboys still get dragged into overtime at home.
Yeah, and it did happen, and it's hard to look at those and think about it, but it comes down to those turnovers, and boy, we'll talk to Stretch about it, but Ed, I thought the quarterback, he giveth and he taketh away. I mean, this is a quarterback that it is. We kind of hit him over the head for a while and kind of joked about how many games did he go in a row. Ed, you remember all this stuff with barely getting. He couldn't even get to 200 passing yards. Today he goes over 400. I mean, usually it would take him at least 2 games, like 2.5 games, to go over 400 yards.
He went into this game as the only long-time starting quarterback without a 300-yard passing game, and he finishes the game with 455 yards, which is the most in franchise history in a game in which the Cowboys won, which speaks a lot to the competition and the fact that the Eagles have had 13 different starting players in their secondary because of all the injuries that they've suffered at those positions. But it also speaks to the greatness of Amari Cooper. I mean, this guy, to Jerry Jones's and Stephen Jones's eternal credit, Will McClay, everybody who was involved in this front office decision, when they're 3-5, to make this trade, or they're 3-4 against the Redskins, to make this trade and gamble the season on it with a first-round pick involved was a nervy move. Bigger than Garrett going for it on 4th down today in overtime. And it's paid off. Statistically, Cooper's been the best receiver in football since this trade was made. In the 6 weeks since he became a Cowboy, he leads the Cowboys in every statistical category.
Yeah. I'm a little more reserved than you are to give too much credit, like to Will McClay and those guys, because one of the reasons they had to go trade that first is because of the group that they brought in. But it was remarkable to watch. He was a matchup nightmare, and then at the end, I mean, an incredibly lucky play. Ball bounces up, but when a guy's going like he is. As hot as he is,
he maintained his concentration level, good eye-hand coordination, and he makes a play. You know what? Today was the first time in team history that the Cowboys had a 400-yard passer, a 200-yard receiver, and a 100-yard rusher, all in the same game.
First time in
Cowboys history.
In the history of this great organization.
They've won, 5 Super Bowls, and this was the first time in the history of the franchise they've had a 400-yard passer, a 200-yard receiver, and a 100-yard rusher all in the same game.
golly, and you just think about some of the combinations, the triplets, and before that, the great Pearson and
Staubach and Dorsett,
the whole gang, and it came down to this, to what happened today. Now, this quarterback, though, Ed, let's stay with Dak for a second. The 2 picks, okay, he had gone like 165 snaps.
I think it was 20 quarters without
throwing an interception.
Turnover, yeah.
He throws 2. One of them, he didn't throw it far enough. Okay, that's a bad one.
The goal line play. Going for Cooper there, too.
Has another one that the guy is just inaccurate sometimes.
He airmailed wide open Michael Gallup, and that was
Gallup for an 18-yard in. I think it was an in route, and had him, and he just
that was returned to the 2-yard line. So the 2 interceptions were a swing of 14 points because the Cowboys should have scored. Had he laid it out a little further, Amari Cooper scores easily on the first throw. And the next one, the interception, is returned to the 2-yard line, and the Eagles score a touchdown off that. So you cost your team a touchdown on one end and cost them a touchdown on the other end as well on a day where your defense has been dominant. And that would be my biggest criticism of Dak Prescott is, you got to be able to manage the game in that situation. And that's what everybody thinks he is a game manager, and a guy who avoids mistakes. And for the most part he does, but he showed just awful accuracy and judgment in that situation, and he put the game in jeopardy, and he did it multiple times. And I've probably been one of Dak Prescott's biggest defenders and greatest advocates. There were people on Twitter today who wanted to go to Cooper Rush, believe it or not. Plenty of them. I heard from a lot of them. But so the thing I think the Cowboys have,
I think you need to delete or block all those people.
I don't respond to them.
No, you read more than I do. I don't really look through the mentions.
So I think when you look at this team and the way it's playing right now, 5-game winning streak, probably going to win their division. They have a championship runner. They have, when they're healthy, a championship offensive line. They have a championship receiver with Amari Cooper, and I think they have a championship defense. The wild card in the whole thing is the quarterback. There's just too much inconsistency. You never know how he's going to play from week to week, and even sometimes play to play. And
yet, at the end of this season and going into next season, the biggest reason this guy is going to get extended, because Jerry loves him. And Jerry, even today when they were asking about these miscues and the mistakes, Jerry leaned on, I never doubt him because I know he's going to make up for it.
Right.
I know he's going to come back and make up for it. But the reason he's going to get big money, and I'm not saying just insane like Aaron Rodgers, $35 million a year, but the biggest reason is that trade they made for him is going to, and I'm with you, I like Dak a lot, but the biggest reason, and he's got a great running back, but what saved this season, in addition to a great defense, but what really saved the season was bringing this wide receiver in here, and that's going to get Dak extended. And then even when he's extended...
I was thinking tonight, we hear all the time about quarterbacks who are so good, they get average receivers paid. This is a situation where a very good receiver is going to get an average quarterback paid.
Yeah.
And Jerry has said consistently that he is going to extend and commit to Dak Prescott long term. What he hasn't said is at what level. And so that will tell you ultimately what the Cowboys really think of Dak Prescott, who, before today, his team was 1-7 when he threw 2 or more interceptions, which he did today. So now they're 2-7 when he throws that many interceptions. So
who else, by the way, off the top of your head, has been like that? Had a wide receiver make an average quarterback? I mean, Matt Ryan's starting to look like an average quarterback, and Julio Jones.
I'll compare Dak to Matt Ryan when he gets to a Super Bowl and should have won it if it hadn't been for the way the coordinator called the game. But
I'm trying to think who made Joe Flacco look good when they won that.
Torrey Smith.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that great of a receiving core. I'm just saying he won a Super Bowl.
It was the defense that made him
and then he got a huge contract.
Yeah. They did. Who was the receiver?
They had Antoine Bolden.
Yeah, Antoine Bolden. So anyway, point being that Dak's got to be more consistent and he's got to be more mindful of the game situation. To his credit, he is a guy who is remarkably unflappable, and he's a guy who is able to respond positively to adversity even when he creates it. So I give him full credit for all of that, but I've talked to enough defensive coordinators around the league who have played against the Cowboys this year who are not at all impressed with Prescott, who think that his ability to run from the pocket and gain yards using his legs is his most significant positive attribute, and that even in games where he seemingly has thrown well, they do not think he is a great passer, and they think his inconsistency will ultimately cost the Cowboys in the playoffs.
All right, I'm just thinking about that. To be such a great leader and so respected, he's had kind of few accomplishments. I mean,
and when you think about his
like that played for the Cowboys,
when you think about what his one playoff game, he played great, right? I mean, he almost beat Aaron Rodgers. I mean,
easily, if not,
he went toe to toe with Aaron Rodgers throwing the football statistically,
yeah.
and they lost the game partly because of how badly the coaches handled the first part of the game, all the penalties they got and the timeouts they wasted.
Although even in that game, he threw a pick six. You know, I mean, he sort of made Romo. I mean, that's one thing he has in Romo's career was sort of defined by he was a great come from behind quarterback, but a lot of times the reason they were behind was because of him, and he was having to pull it out and everything. So. It is a huge win for the Cowboys. They improved to 8-5. We'll get Stretch's grades. Ed, let's go over the defensive side of the ball a little bit and discuss some of that. They, for the most part, front four played really well. A couple of controversial calls in this game. We will talk a little bit about what happened with Zeke, but Randy Gregory continues. How many roughing the passers, or
that was a ridiculous call.
But I mean, it just or he's going to hit the to the face mask, hands to the face mask. I mean, he really is getting called a lot, somewhat unfairly, and to be on the ground and then basically reach up with both hands, put them around the quarterback's ankles, and bring him down. We could look back 30, 40 years in this league, and that just would never be called. And it wasn't, as I think Aikman made the point, it wasn't like forcible. It's supposed to be like diving at those legs. Yeah, you protect him.
He wasn't diving. He was on the ground.
For the legs. And I tell you what, before you respond to this, I want to get your take on this. I want to hear from Randy Gregory. I had a chance to ask him, Randy Gregory, after the game, what he made of that call, and does he have any thoughts on how he could avoid that in the future?
I think that's about it. Yeah.
Jerry said he didn't want you to change anything you're doing, and I think he passed that along to you. But on that sack you made from a seated position, basically, where you wrap the Wentz up, what else can you do there? I mean, do you know to not get called on that?
Right now, no, I don't know. I mean, I talked to the ref a little bit. He didn't really give me the answer I was looking for. I think the best thing for that is I need to realize that is a penalty, and then next time it comes up, get off the ground and sack him and not go for the legs. So I'm not the biggest fan of the call, but the ref's call, it is what it is.
You sort of feel snake bit right now, like they're kind of almost looking out for you with some of these calls lately?
A little bit, but, it is what it is.
There he was, Gregory, who was like a lot of folks, was trying to figure out what he needs to do, and he actually, you heard him say, Ed, he believes he can, in the future, maybe try to get back off the ground and then make the sack. But he really doesn't have any answers. What did you make of that call? And then we can go ahead, Ed, sound off on a couple of these other calls that were made in the game. One horrible call against the Eagles, and then two really questionable calls against the Cowboys that come to mind.
Well, first of all, I think we should point out that Randy Gregory's got, 4 sacks in his last 5 games, and he had 2 sacks in his first 19 games in a Cowboys uniform. So this seems to be an emerging player who is rewarding the Cowboys, and Jerry Jones in particular, for their faith in him, given all of his drug suspensions and other off-the-field issues. Which reminds me, where is David Irving? Is he still on the roster?
They just let him
Is he going to want to play it again at some point again? Or what's his eligibility? That's an interesting situation that they never seem to address. Yeah, I mean, it was a bizarre game from an officiating standpoint. Clete Blakeman, the official, the referee in this game, is so highly regarded by the league that they had him come in at the last minute and lead an all-star officiating crew in that high-profile Monday night Redskins Chiefs Rams game a couple of weeks ago. Now, that also turned into a circus officiating-wise, but this was a badly officiated game from the first play. They had a replay on the opening kickoff because Jordan Lewis clearly fumbled the football. They should have gotten it right from that standpoint, and there were like 5 Eagles around the football. There's no way Dallas should have been allowed to keep the football.
They said they didn't get a definitive
They said it was
look.
So they said, first of all, well, we didn't call it a fumble, so they didn't know it was a fumble, and then they didn't determine who recovered the fumble that was the fumble that wasn't a fumble that was a fumble.
And the Eagles player ran off the field with the ball.
Right. And then the player talking about on Gregory, that was a ridiculous foul, was also a ridiculous call on Dallas Goedert on the long touchdown play that would have tied the game, that was offensive interference when he was clearly hit in the jaw by Jeff Heath, and then he
didn't even really extend his arm.
Kind of swam past him like you would have to do after you get hit in the head like that. That was a ridiculous call. And then we talked about it. It was historic. No offensive player with the ball in his hands has been called for lowering his helmet and initiating contact with the defender until it happened to Zeke Elliott today. I mean, it was just a badly officiated game, and there's been way too many of those this year.
It's almost like they talked to somebody and they said, "Hey guys, y'all remember that rule that we put in and nobody's ever called?
Well,
be
remember
on the lookout for that."
Well, but they made a big point of that in the offseason. We're going to call this, and we're going to call it on.
We talked
we're going to call
about
it
it.
on
We wrote about
offensive players and defensive players. It could lead to ejections, and then they totally backed off, and then they started backdooring the penalty. They weren't enforcing it on the field. They weren't throwing flags, but they were noting these offenses, the violations of the rule, the technicality of this rule, and they were notifying the players in letters and fining them, like Jalen Smith last week. How does he not get a penalty for that, but Zeke Elliott gets a penalty for what happened today? It's because Al Riveron and the officiating crews in New York are deciding week to week what penalties they want to enforce and which ones they don't. And there's no week-to-week consistency on the field. The players have no idea what might be called.
Yeah, and we'll get to hear Jerry sound off on that a little bit, some of these calls. And Ed, a story that was broken by our friend Adam Schefter from ESPN this morning, and I'm talking about as we record this on Sunday evening after the game, that Jason Witten was being lobbied by Jason Garrett to come out of the booth, come back and play for the team. And Jason's been under a lot of scrutiny. Ed, I don't know if you've heard this. Some folks don't think he's doing that great a job in the booth in Monday Night Football. And
I thought you were talking about Garrett.
Well, yeah, Garrett's actually turned it around a little bit, but they've tried to offer him a lifeline. Come back and play for us. We still need you. And Ed, I want to get your comment on it, but first you'll hear me ask Jerry for a definitive answer about this.
Jerry, I was standing back here. I didn't quite hear you on the Witten report that came out. Is that something that said they specifically said Jason's lobbying for him to come out of the booth? Is that something you'd be open to?
That's not correct. That's just not correct. Period. He had his best game. I was with up at the Collegiate Football Foundation, and Joe was master of ceremonies, and he said they had their very best game. That Jason had his best game last week. So that's not right. Jason is not. And he's got his head down and focused, and his hands in the dirt, as he said, up there with Monday Night Football, and that's where that is. But we don't have any. I don't have anything to comment about that. There's nothing that is there enough to comment on at all. Jason's been saying since before he took the job, I want to play football, and so that may be coming out of his mouth 10 years from now. But really, I put it in that kind of vein. He misses competing, but he's got his head down and hands in the dirt doing the job on Monday Night Football.
Now that you guys are 8-5, he might want to kind of jump on this bandwagon.
Well, I do. I'm on. I'm for taking some credit around here with that on that Jones pass you saw at the end.
I was just going to ask you, the trades for obviously Joey and Roy Williams didn't work out. This one's worked out beautifully for you so far. Are you kind of going maybe GM of the year again?
Well, I don't know about that, but I will say this. That is a far cry from a month ago, isn't it? On a house cleaning.
Comeback GM of the year.
On a house cleaning.
What do you think? Midway through the third quarter, y'all have full control of the game. It's 9-0. Y'all are backed up in your own territory, up by 2 scores. Y'all come out and throw it twice. then you get the Dak interception, puts them back in the game. What do you think about that series right there?
Well, first of all, I liked the way we took the ball down the field and got in position, and then we got his turnover. I think we got that field position on turnover, didn't we?
Yeah.
On to get down there to get the interception. Wasn't that a turnover?
I'm talking about you're up 9-0, you're at your own 14.
That's right.
And then they throw 2 times in a row. And the interception, the guy returns it to the 2. The Eagles are getting in the game.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the other
but I
two.
think we had gotten the ball over a short field. We'd gotten it on a short field, too. I was feeling real good going in, obviously. Yeah. And I was just flabbergasted. And my thoughts were, if anybody can look over that or get past that, Dak can. And this team will. We've earned some good things here tonight. We've been very physical. When we ran there at halftime, everybody was proud of how physical we'd been, offensive line, defensive line, on the defense. So honestly thought we could overcome that. Now, when you get back, when you're up 9, that's one thing. Obviously, mistake, turnover, anything, and you're in for, like we were, you're just in for a game of it.
Does this almost remind you, you've had some players you signed, Haley, Dion, that made some enormous impacts. The Cooper impact, we're still, 5-6 games into this, but does it almost remind you of, it's been pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I think Haley was the one that I thought impacted our team the most. Sometimes you bring guys on. I thought bringing on Dion was a major difference in our team and made a major difference in the team. And I'm not caring whether it's free agency, I don't care what it is, sometimes guys a key part. And this team, at the time, for a receiver of that caliber, for one that we would like to have had with that pick anyway, 9 months later or 6 months later, that was just a golden opportunity. And the other thing is, I've just never bought anything that was quality that I bought cheap. Never have. It's always, every time you go around Dallas and they'll tell you that everybody that looks at it thought I was a madman and overpaid. But any time that you go for quality, you got to go. You got to pay for it.
Well, you did get Antoine Woods on the cheap.
Well, and certainly there's a few of those down there. We've got to have some things to make up for some of the mess-ups that we do up there at the top. I'm not saying it's right every time when you pay a lot for it.
Jerry, that 62-yard field goal before the half, what was your confidence in that after you missed a 45-yarder before?
I thought it was, I didn't confidence in the word. I just thought when we made it, it was going to really give us a lift. A score like that right for the half gives you a lift. It's a great time to get the lift. And with the way we started kind of anemic early in the game, I thought we'd come back out and benefit from that long field goal at the half.
What was the
and I think we did.
quarter like for you, back and forth, with so much at stake?
I just thought we were playing an inspired team, one that was playing to, they weren't going to walk out of here out there taking their last breath. And so I thought we were in that kind of game. And those games end like that. When they get up, we there's no question. We let them fool around there that first half. With the turnovers, you can play the greatest games in the world, but you lose that turnover battle as badly as we lost it. And you've got yourself an even Steven situation.
In that light, what did you think about the choker comments from Philadelphia, coming out of Philadelphia? I
didn't pay any attention to that. Those are minute compared to the things I've heard in 30 years about myself, not necessarily about the Cowboys.
You heard some of
we
that.
don't lose any sleep over that stuff.
You made some of those. You heard some of that after the big trade, after the trade for Cooper. There's a lot of criticism.
That's right.
How vindicated do you feel now, having taken that gun? Especially, I think you lost the first game out of the gate, right?
I think a big part of competing, I think a big part of doing things, of a desire to excel, is to show them. I think that's a major motivational factor. Let's show them. And so I think that sports, I think football, this gives you a chance when people say, I don't like that move, that's not small, he's too small, he's too that. I like this stuff. As a matter of fact, I make my worst grades when I'm being praised and successful. I really do.
And there he was, Jerry Jones, on several different fronts, and always
media critic. Jerry Jones.
Jerry is being told, it's by Joe Tessitore, who is the play-by-play announcer for. It's not like he's going to go around saying, "Yeah, Witten's not doing well." Who told Jerry at an awards banquet where they were. That's what. If you didn't know what Jerry's talking about, he was at some sort of college awards banquet he attended, and Joe Tessitore was emceeing the event and told Jerry, hey, Jason's coming off his best week. So Jerry kept referring to Jason's got his hand in the dirt. What did you think, Ed, when you heard that report? And do you think there's anything to it? And do you think there might be, after Jason's faced this sort of criticism, which he's obviously hearing because he's responding from the booth. He's mentioned the criticism. It has to be getting to him a little bit, I would think. How do you think this plays out?
Well, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that this is a ESPN on ESPN report. Jason Witten is working for ESPN. The report emanated with the ESPN's primary information guru, Adam Schefter. ESPN would not, based on my history of working there, you're always more careful when you're reporting on other employees than you would be otherwise. And Schefter's very careful anyway. So there's no way Schefter would get this story wrong. He would obviously have access to Witten, and he would know what's going on. It certainly sounds plausible. I mean, Jeff Swaim got hurt. Tight end's been one of their positions, that's been an issue in the offense all year long. We know how much Jason Garrett worships Jason Witten as a player and as a leader. And hey, if Witten's not having a good time in the booth and maybe broadcasting's not what he thought it was going to be, hadn't been as easy as he thought it was going to be, he thought he was going to slide in there and be Tony Romo, and it was, going to be all lollipops and rainbows, and it's been just the opposite, why not take a shot at it? So I think it's entirely plausible. I'm dead certain that it happened, and I've tried to call Witten, and he hasn't responded to my calls, which makes me all the more certain that it's happened.
I wonder if Booger would stay in that little Booger mobile down there on the sideline.
I think Booger'd be up in the elevator faster than you can snap your fingers.
You think he'd move up there? All right, it is almost time for our grades. Ed, you love this when Stretch comes in there and
my favorite part of the show.
The profanity.
Except for all the parts where I talk.
That's right. That's right. Ed, it is time for me to talk about, though, before we get to Stretch, MyBookie. They do an incredible job. And remember, they always pay. I mean, some of these sites that you use, and their mobile site's great, by the way. Man, they hem and haw because they want you to keep betting before they get you the money back. They pay.
Double down.
They pay in a hurry. They have in-game live betting, the most rewarding player perks in the business. And for you fantasy guys, you could even bet the over-under on how many fantasy points a player will score each game. Who would have known? What was the over-under on Cooper? Maybe 15 fantasy points. He went way over. I would say he probably ended up with about, depending on what league you're in,
I bet Derrick Henry outscored him.
60 points at least. He was 3 touchdowns and 217
4 touchdowns.
yards. I'm talking about Amari.
Yeah, but the other guy had 200 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns.
All right. He did well, too. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Use the promo code DOOMSDAY, DOOMSDAY, to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie online today. That's MyBookie, MyBookie. And don't forget to use the promo code Doomsday when creating your account to claim up to $1,000 in free play. You play, you win, you get paid. All right, and it is time for That's a Stretch with former Cowboys scout and coach Glenn Stretch Smith joining us live from the studios at Channel 8 as he gets ready to do some of that Dale Hansen sports special. And Stretch, let's start. Crazy game. It looked like first team to 9 or 12 was going to win this thing, and then suddenly a shootout occurs. But let's start with the Cowboys offense, and let's start with Dak Prescott, who put up, by his standards, a remarkable amount of passing yards, but certainly
a great statistical game.
Yes, but
on the positive side,
but had to basically overcome his own mistakes. What sort of grade, as we go through Stretch's grades, what sort of grade do you give this quarterback?
Well, he did some things initially early in the game that really I really got excited about. He audibled to a zone play one time, gave it to Zeke, who got 20 yards. 2 plays later, they run another hot look. He dumps the ball to Schultz for 10, and you just think, man, this quarterback is really starting to do some things that lead you to believe he's a franchise-type quarterback. However, he keeps turning the football over. And when I'm saying, the interceptions, that happens. I mean, he laid that ball up to Amari. He didn't see the corner settle back in there and make that play. That didn't really bother me. What bothered me was protecting the football in your end of the field. I mean, he gets a sack. He's got one hand on the ball gets knocked out. He really made a poor throw on the dig, which, you just say, wow, how could you overthrow that by that wide a margin, and really about the time that you're about to give up on him. Then he comes out and kind of saves the day. But he's the guy that put him in the position that they were in, and so I it's really hard for me. I mean, I really was thinking with 50 minutes left in the football game. I hope that you and Ed asked me about a Dak first, because I'm going to go F. But you know what? When he comes out and he's able to save the game, you can't give him a failing grade. But boy, I tell you, he did not play very well. Ed talked about the statistics he had. I mean, throwing for over 400 yards. I mean, I'm going to barely give him a C, guys, and I'm telling you, barely. It's one of those, it's one of those just borderline D type grade, 66. And I would have given him a D. I mean, he's got to protect the football. He's got to do some things that put his team in position to put games like today, really put those games away. So I got to give him a C at best.
Yeah, and it is remarkable that on a day that he puts up these kind of numbers, he certainly has. It's the 50-50 Dak. You never know what you're going to get. We would be talking about his deficiencies if they lose this game, but he does come back and find a way to make some plays. Let's go to the running back, and Zeke certainly had a big day number-wise, and then stretch, of course, and Ed and I will talk about this as we get on the show, a strange, one of the first penalties the NFL's called when you put your head down in space. We talked a lot about that before the season.
It's the first one they've ever called against an offensive player.
And they call it in that instance, and that's I talked to Jerry after one, and he was having a rough time sort of accepting that one and the Randy Gregory one. But let's stick to just the running back.
Stick to his 190 yards.
Yeah, another great performance.
And I mean, again, guys. I mean, he is a tough football player. I mean, he can do it all. I mean, he blocks well. He catches the football well. He's starting to become real quarterback friendly with how he runs those dump down routes. And I mean, I think he's a big time football player. I mean, I'm gonna say, when you look at how he played today, the times he got the ball, I'm going to give him an A. I agree with you guys. I mean, the call, I have no idea as a coach what you would tell him when he's got a player on his back and a player coming at him. Why would you stick your chin up in the air so that they can put their helmet under there and split your chin? I have no idea. So I try to stay away from that officiating side of things, and you guys will have plenty of time to banter that. But when you look at the way he's playing and the way he played, I mean, that's a winning performance in an A for the running back. And I also say that, and Rod Smith does a great job too. Now, he's not immensely talented. I mean, he doesn't wow you with what he does or how he does things, but he can block, and he gets in there and he spells Zeke and does a nice job. So overall, I'm going to give the running backs an A.
All right, let's move to the offensive line. And big question after the game on a lot of Cowboys' minds. Zach Martin has to leave this game. Good news so far is it just seems like there's no structural damage, ACL, anything like that, and that there's a chance he'll be back fairly soon. What did you see from up front? Obviously, the thing that jumps out at folks is Tyron Smith being called all those times for holding.
3 times.
Yes. And again, I thought 2 of those were not very. It was kind of questionable. I mean, again, outside the frame. I know what they're looking for in there. I got to give Tyron a little bit of a break. He has not played. He's taken a few weeks to try to get himself healthy, but overall, I think the offensive line is still doing some really good things. I see in pass protection, I see him pass off, those stunts. I saw Connor Williams come in, and he gets bum rushed some, and that bull rush gets into him and kind of knocks him back. But he's got okay balance, and I thought overall this offensive line, even though they had the penalties, and really those penalties are you've got to get that cleaned up, but I think they will. I mean, to me, the offensive line, gave you a winning effort today, and I'm going to give that group a B.
Yeah, pretty remarkable, Ed. I don't know how many times you've seen that, but it's not like they normally pick up holding penalties. And in that instance, at a very key juncture of that game when it looked like they were going to get a holding call on, I think it was Suafilo, they picked that flag up. Tight end, there was the rumor about Jason Witten, actually a report from ESPN that Jason was lobbying to bring him back.
Adam Schefter does not like his reporting to be characterized as rumors.
Yeah, I know. I cleaned it up.
I'm just saying.
As soon as I said it, well, some of these Schefters had this season are a little shaky.
That's for you to say.
No, it's kind of interesting. That's the tight ends actually did some good things today. Stretch, and I know you've been tough on them at times this season, but Jarwin, Schultz, some pretty good plays, I thought.
They did a nice job on some hot reads. I mean, getting out and making themselves, again, quarterback friendly to that. I thought even your boy Jumpy got in there, Gathers. He did a good job on the backside a few times. I thought on the fourth down call, they washed it down, did a nice job in a 3 tight set. So, they're getting better. I don't know how you could have gotten a whole lot worse from a blocking standpoint. Just go out there and get in somebody's way. But they did play a little more physical in this game, and I thought that overall that group gave you a winning effort, and I'm going to give that group a B as well.
Well, they could have gotten worse because they lost their best guy. Swaim's been out for a couple of weeks, and he's been by far their best receiver, and these other guys have kind of contributed a few plays here and there.
And I mean, you make a good point. I mean, they losing him. I thought that the thing that really bothered me was the lack of physicality with how they were blocking, but they've gotten better, and so to be critical of that, and I have been critical, like Matt was saying. I mean, I'm going to be the first one to also say how they played better against Philadelphia, and really a very physical team. They gave a winning effort.
All right, wide receivers, obviously Amari Cooper, 217 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. He has, you might say, has helped save this season. He's been a huge part of the turnaround. What did you make of that unit?
He's just a polished route runner. I mean, he really does a great job. I got frustrated late in the game with Gallup. I mean, he gave up on a 9 route. This is a secondary in Philadelphia who I really thought the Cowboys would go after early. Now, they did not, but to see Gallup kind of quit on that 9 route, it shows me, kind of what a rookie receiver does. He makes kind of rookie mistakes, and I thought this group, I mean, I'm telling you, I think Amari Cooper is a big-time player. I think he's a very polished route runner. I think he got some things today out of him that, even his blocking, Hearn did a nice job. Gallup's got to continue to grow. So as a whole, I'm going to grade that group as a B. Amari Cooper, I'm going to give him an A. And I'd pose the question to you guys: hey, who made the better trade? The Cowboys giving up a 1 for Cooper, or Chicago giving up 2 1s for Mack? I mean, what trade looks better right now? And you got to give Jerry credit for stepping up there and picking this young man up, because he has, without question, made a difference in this offense, and I think he is a big-time receiver with big-time tools, skills, speed, all the things that you want to see out of an X.
Well, to answer your question and to do it quickly, I would note that John Gruden seems to have 2 teams in first place: the Bears in the NFC North for the trade with Khalil Mack, and the Cowboys in the NFC East making the trade for Amari Cooper, both Raider players. So that's my answer.
I like it, and they won today, didn't they? Beat Pittsburgh, for crying out loud. How do you?
The Bears are playing right now.
I don't even know how to explain that one, but
they're in a close game with the Rams right now.
Yeah, and the Cowboys could jump ahead of the Bears if they go ahead and lose this game to the Rams. Okay, let's jump over to the defensive side. For a long time of this game, they were keeping everybody out of the end zone, and then of course Dak basically handed a score to the Eagles and kind of jump started their offense a little bit. Still, in terms of the yardage they gave up, nothing to sneeze at all. Let's start up front. You still, the Gregory call is baffling. It's hard to know what to do when you're on the ground. How are you going to bring a quarterback down? That seemed like a pretty bad call. He did have a sack early in the game. What did you make of this, the front four for the Cowboys defensive line?
Well, I thought they controlled the game 90% of the game. I mean, they really did. The front four, I think that they continue to play with great effort. I mean, I really like I like how they move guys up and down the line too. I mean, I like that they move Crawford inside, they move him outside. I mean, there's some things that to me really show that this team is wanting to continue to get pressure with that four, and sometimes they'll bring a linebacker and fire five, but they get consistent pressure with four, and I think that says a lot about the effort, about how hard they play, how they chase the football. I mean, this group is really, really a fine group of players, and so I think this I'm going to give them a B+ and bordering on an A for the job that they did today, chasing Carson Wentz and doing some of the things that they were able to do to really shut down that running game.
All right, let's look at the linebackers. The Wolf Hunter himself actually got juked once by Sproles, which has happened to a lot of players, and then stumbled in coverage at one point. It, had a couple of pock marks on his game. What did you think of he and Jalen?
Yeah, he and Jalen, they didn't play to the level that they've been playing to. I mean, it's hard for me to, in the open field, I'm going to say, about everybody's going to miss Sproles in that situation. And then he got into that, where they free released him out of the backfield on that fourth down call. Then he got picked a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't, you got to kind of rub through that and learn how to take a better angle there. But I think when you really look at how he plays from a physical sense, how he comes in and takes on guys that are pulling and trying to kick out, and he'll wrong shoulder that a lot of times. He's a really good football player, and this linebacking core, even Wilson today, I mean, he made some plays in space. So this linebacking core, is only going to get better now, getting Sean Lee back. So there's a lot of positives there. I'm going to give that group a B as well, and they gave you a winning effort.
B for the linebackers, and let's move to the secondary.
Well, I saw Brown, again, do some good things. I saw Wouzier do some good things. Concerned me a little bit that Byron Jones got beat deep. Wouzier, I didn't see a real burst once Jeffrey got by him on that 9 route. But overall, this group is still continuing to play at a really high level, and Heath, I saw Woods come in and smack Jeffrey one time on a slot. So I think that this group is going to continue to get better too, and so I just think overall the defense, and I really look at them, D-line, linebackers and defensive backs, but I think overall they gave you a winning effort today, even though it got a little ugly at the end of the game. I'm going to overall give the whole group the same grade, which is a B, because I think that's kind of what they gave you. It wasn't anything where you'd say wow, and it wasn't anything where you'd say, boy, that really concerns me. So it's an above average situation, but I think this defense, as young as they are, will continue to get better. And I still believe that championships are truly won when you can get critical stops and you can stop guys. And that's what this team has shown throughout the year. And, as a Cowboy fan, I do think you can hang your hat on the fact that they do have a really good defense, and they're going to continue to get better.
All right, lastly, you've had a burr in your saddle much of the season about these special teams. What do you What did you make of this unit?
I don't see any improvement. I don't see any improvement in their cover game. I don't see any improvement in their returns and getting any returns. It really is starting to bother me, and maybe I'm being openly critical because it's every week that I look at it and I think, what the hell's going on? I mean, how many times have we seen a returner come out? I mean, today, that no question, it was a fumble. I don't think they could. You were talking about some calls earlier. I don't think they could overturn that because I don't think it was blatantly obvious who got the football. But more than that, it's the coverage teams. I mean, if he doesn't kick it out of the end zone, I mean, they're getting past the 30 consistently, and that's a concern to me. And then I start thinking, well, wow, do we need to look at maybe turning over some of these guys on the bottom of the roster to be better special teams players? They say Rod Smith's a heck of a special teams player, and I think he does a great job, but their special teams, to me, need to clean up in a hurry before it costs them a game, because it's bordering right now on it could have cost them about 3 football games. It hasn't, but it could have, and I think that's something that you've got to address, and they've got to get better at it. I mean, with Maher kicking that deep field goal, I'm going to give him a D, but that's the best grade I can give that bunch.
There he is, 62-yard field goal for Maher. And Stretch, can't wait to watch you on TV. Always appreciate your work. Thanks for joining us this evening.
All right, man. Y'all have a
Thanks,
great
boss.
evening. Thanks.
See you, buddy.
There he goes,
Thanks.
Glenn
Thanks.
Stretch Smith. Boy, always good to hear from Stretch. He's good on TV. He's good on podcasting. And Ed, as we record this Sunday evening after the Cowboys' 29-23 overtime win over the Eagles, basically buried the Eagles. Redskins buried themselves. What a pitiful little team that has become.
If only they had Colin Kaepernick.
But that's right. A lot of folks suggesting that. Ed, I don't know if you are or not.
Would go over big at the nation's capital for some reason.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think everybody would support Colin. Ed, you have noticed an interesting trend, and what started this trend to a certain extent was that huge Cowboys 13-10 win over the Saints.
Well, I think that it was a real test of legitimacy of this Cowboys team and the philosophy of the organization as far as how they're building the team. We go and we watch the Rams and the Chiefs and the Saints, scoring 50 points and averaging almost 40 points a game, and they seem unstoppable, and it almost seems like that's the way you have to win in the NFL now. But what we've seen the last 2 weeks, especially in the NFC, with the game you're talking about, the Cowboys-Saints, and the game underway right now, which is the Rams playing the Bears, we're seeing that the teams like the Cowboys and the Bears can force these high-scoring, one-dimensional teams to play their style of game. And they're able to hold down the score on these teams in a way that these other teams that have, lost and been rendered defenseless can't. The Cowboys had a historic performance defensively against the Saints. It was one of the worst games by every measure that Drew Brees and Sean Payton have ever had in all their years together. And now we're seeing the same thing happen with this Rams team that led the NFL in scoring last year and was top 3 this year. Right now, they're in the fourth quarter, and the Rams have 6 points. So they're going to be held well below their average, as were the Saints. So maybe these teams that are built in a more traditional way can still succeed against these high-scoring offensive teams.
I think it's a fair point, and I'm about ready to say that I would rather have Scott Linehan calling my offense than Sean McVay. What's McVay's name?
Sean McVay.
Okay. It was so quiet. I thought
you were going to say Sean Payton.
No, it was Sean Payton. Yeah, I was just like, wait, it was McVay, right? McVay. I mean, it's an interesting point, Ed. It really is that you can kind of get lured into this sort of bullying style. In the NBA, the only team that still can keep a game down and muddy it up, there's only one, and it's the Memphis Grizzlies. And it's still that grit and grind, and they lure you into their style of basketball. And they're not great. It's not pretty to watch, but it's hard not to end up playing their style, and that's what the Cowboys seem capable of. And at least on this evening, it appears that the Bears are able to do that.
And to maybe a lesser extent, the Chiefs are the third team that we talked about being able to, score at historic pace. And today they played the Ravens out outside in the cold at Arrowhead. And the Ravens had a lead going into the fourth quarter. Now, Patrick Mahomes did some ridiculous things in the game once again, and he's having a record-setting season, the likes of which we've never seen from such an inexperienced player, a guy in his first full season in the NFL as a starting quarterback, having over 40 touchdown passes and over 4,000 yards already. But again, even that team was forced for the first time to play from behind in the fourth quarter today by the number one scoring defense team. So maybe it still works. Maybe traditional football can still work.
The one thing I think we'd both agree on is they won't win in the playoffs, turning the ball over 3 times and being careless with the football. And I don't see a lot of scenarios where Dak's going to throw for over 400 yards, because if you look at his history, he never does it. And he barely ever throws over 300 yards. So this was rare. And this is not a good – I mean, hey, the Cowboys have done – I mean, it's very impressive, especially the Saints win. That was unbelievable. But they have benefited throughout this amazing turnaround from being in a horrible division. I mean, right now you could make the argument that the Giants are playing just about as good as the Eagles or the Redskins.
Well, I think the thing that tells you how – ridiculously average or worse the NFC East is, to the point you're making, is that Dallas is the only division leader that going into this week, had not scored 300 points. Now, they were also the only one that hadn't given up 300 points. So that speaks to the defense and the success. But offensively, they're way behind all these other teams, and yet they beat the Saints and they beat the Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champs. And in both games, they had negative turnover numbers. They were in the red on turnover. And today, and really in both games, they were 1 for 5 against the Saints, scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and they were very poor in that regard again today. So I don't think they can sustain this. Like, I think they've got to turn around all of those numbers to have a real chance to do anything, because while they may get one home game in the playoffs, they're eventually going to have to go to either New Orleans or LA and beat one or both of those two teams at home in a climate that they're very comfortable playing in and they can score a lot of points in.
Well, at one point I was looking at my parking passes for this season, and I laughed at the fact that it said, the wild card game.
Oh, they've already passed those out.
Yeah, and it's part of the packet. In the NFC title game, I do have a parking spot for that. It's in my parking.
Is that in L.A. or New Orleans?
No, it's right here. It's going to be played right here.
I remember the other time Jerry did that.
Yeah,
Jerry passed out tickets to the players before they played the Giants when they were the number 1 seed, and the Giants found out about it because I reported it on TV, and they used that. Tom Coughlin used that in his speech, and the Cowboys were ousted in the first round of the playoffs at home. So first number 1 seed ever to lose in the current playoffs.
Another reason the Cowboys hate you. Boy, it's been a good episode.
That wasn't even the first one.
The Doomsday podcast. I've been a little verklempt. But Ed, thanks for fighting through it with me and kind of getting me through it. Frito Nation Productions, Mark Frito Friedman does a great job. Thanks to Glenn Stretch Smith. Thanks to Hodges Capital. They do a tremendous job over there, and we appreciate Craig and Clark Hodges and what they've done to support us, and it's just been great. And thanks to Lowe's. Lowe's is joining us, Ed. Thank the Lowe's folks, and that's why you're going to, some of those power drills and things you like doing around the house. I'm going to get you some discounts over there.
You know what? You might be surprised to know this, because I'm not at all handy around the house, and in fact, my lovely wife Jill does the baking, the cooking, the cleaning, the raising of the kids, the shepherding of the pets.
Fashion guy,
and she will strap on the blower on her back. And I did used to mow the lawn, but I stopped doing that quite a few years ago. But I actually worked. It's ridiculous to think this. I worked in the home improvement department at Kmart for a summer one year.
Wow, man!
I had I could mix the paints.
Could be a fly on the wall.
There was a formula for that.
But anything else, everybody.
These guys coming in and asking me what kind of sheetrock they needed and how they install paneling, and I had to give them some advice.
This will be good.
I didn't know.
I'm going to take you guys on a shopping spree to Lowe's, and the Lowe's folks do a great job. It's a great store, and we're excited that they're joining us, the Doomsday Podcast. Thanks. You can find us on Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Pandora, Spotify, all the different places where podcasts are heard. And
if you're not listening, you have to be trying not to listen.
Yeah,
I think the point
and I think there are people that are doing that. But Ed, appreciate it. Frito, thank you, and good night, everybody.
Lights are shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now, you don't see them anymore. This year will not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.